Hello, everyone. Dude dogs, thick hogs, everybody in the thick hog community. Welcome back. Thanks again for being here and listening and helping me have some therapy of my own by talking this out. I want to thank everybody for the positive feedback and kind messages and words and comments that everybody gave me. I really appreciate that. I was very uncertain, as I said on the last episode. Really didn't know where this was going to go or how well it would be received or if anyone would even hear it. So it's really nice to see that everybody was going out of their way to listen to it and messaging me about it, including some people that I didn't expect to listen to it. It was a really nice feeling to know that people cared about listening to me talk about my friendship with Scott. So I was maybe a little bit uncertain if I was going to do this today. I don't know why, but I had just a kind of weird day as far as emotions go. I think I'm in the middle of, or the beginning of, I don't even know, of grieving. And I just had a very agitated day at work, and I have an amazing boss who is also my friend and is also a friend of Scott's, and he nicely let me leave early today because I was kind of in just a weird mood and a weird headspace. I don't know exactly why. I just kind of felt really agitated and annoyed and frustrated, and so I just really appreciate being heard and understood and able to leave. And on the way home, I was kind of just like, I'm in too kind of grumpy of a mood to really do this. But once I got home and I mellowed a little bit, and actually ate, because I was probably very hangry. I ate and I played a little bit of FC24, and then I was kind of like, no, after last week, yeah, I was tired, and my voice was gone, and I couldn't really talk that much afterwards. It was therapy for me. It was a nice way for me to get everything, or the start of getting everything out of my brain and out of my body. And so I appreciate coming back to this. I'm going to continue on sort of the end of the journey, and then I'll say it now so most people hear it, because I don't want to go. I'm on a tight 1 hour and 30-minute time limit here because I do have prior engagements, but I wanted to try and keep it consistent as far as releasing it on the same day if I can. So I'm going to try and be real tight here. But I want to say at the beginning, while most people are listening or most people are here, that next week I will do another episode, assuming I get enough support. Support's the wrong word, but as long as I get enough people reaching out to me, I'm going to do, we did an AMA once separately, Scott and I, and I'll do another one now that, is literally anything you want to ask me about, tastefully speaking. Although if you've listened to the podcast, there's nothing tasteful about it. It's hot garbage. But I wanted to open it up to everybody, just ask any questions they had, maybe about Scott, about me and Scott's friendship, or just anything in general, anything you want to know, or even if it's just to hear more, like have a conversations or whatever. I think I'm just going to open it up to that and see how much interaction I get from that. And then I think on last episode this, I said that I was feeling guilty about piggybacking off of sort of the fame of Scott, or the fame of our friendship, like the minor internet celebrity. But nice. I don't even know what I'm saying now. Adam actually listened to the podcast. It was posted in the YMS I guess, Discord, and he listened to it, and he actually sent me like a very nice message, a very nice voice message that I wasn't expecting from him. I mean, I don't think that Adam's actually ever listened to the podcast, not that I'm aware of. So it was very nice for him to listen, and he kind of said, like, don't feel guilty about it, because honestly, Scott wouldn't care, and that's true. Like he wouldn't. I've said this to a million people. Like, he wouldn't want us to change our lives. He wouldn't want us to go, not do the things we were doing before, not tell the jokes we were doing before, and not be that kind of person and have those interactions. It's not at all what he would want. So I'm just going to keep going, I guess, and see how long this lasts and how long people want to listen. So, I mean, I was done my 2021 top 10 for best of the decade. I was just waiting for Scott to listen to watch more movies. So in theory, I can do the best of the decade for 2021 if anybody wants to hear that. And I can do a few other things that we sort of had ideas that were in the can. And, I'll sprinkle in, obviously, I think for the rest of my life on this planet, I will be sprinkling in stuff about Scott and stories. And so I can just keep doing what we were doing with, maybe not the same extent, obviously, because having one person speak and not have the bounce off of humor, and obviously I'm never going to be able to replace Scott ever, but having so much material that we had worked on, or things that we had in the can, or ideas or whatever, I'm just going to keep going, I guess. And if anyone wants more of something or less of something, I know you're all greedy pigs, so I know you're going to want more of something. But if you do like this, or you don't like that, or things we've done in the past as far as like movie reviews or wrestling or requests, or like any of that stuff, I'm still open to doing any of that. I'm kind of tinkering with the idea of having a few of mine and Scott's friends come on for a couple episodes, just to hang out and do some stuff and be a little bit more of an upbeat environment, and just let everybody kind of talk through whatever they want to talk through. So there might be some of that. There's obviously been a few people talking to me about Drew's minor league hockey corner, which we'll see if that actually happens. And yeah, so like I said in last episode, I'm going to start doing live streams. I've got almost everything set up. There's a few things I still need to purchase, but I'm getting there. I think I'll try and do the first one at the beginning of October if I can get my shit together, because it's currently recording on the 17th. You're listening to this on the 18th in theory. So I've only got a couple weeks left here to kind of really get moving. But yeah, keep supporting. You can follow me on social media if you want, at Sarian Softpaws, SarianSoftPaws. That's on Twitter and Instagram, Letterboxd. I do have a Twitch channel, which apparently nobody could find, so I'm going to have to link it in the description of the video, but it is twitch.tv/SarianSoftpaws. I'm going to start doing Twitch, as well as just doing regular recorded videos that I will be putting on this YouTube channel going forward, because, I don't have the talent to do anything else. Sorry, my phone's going crazy, so I'm just going to shut it down. Yeah, so I guess I don't have anything else to say. I mean, if you want to help support me, I mean, that's the thing, is I feel really guilty asking if anybody wants to support and help, because everybody gave so much money to the GoFundMe for Scott's services and for everything. So I don't want to be a greedy pig. You're the greedy pigs. But if you do want to give me any support or help getting this whole streaming, twitching, YouTuber side going, paypal.me/SarianSoftpaws. And that would be excellent, because I'm still missing a second monitor and an actual gaming or computer chair. And I may or may not need a capture card. I'm still waiting for somebody to give me one, and if they don't give me one, then I'm gonna have to buy one. But as it stands right now, that's kind of what I'm aiming for. I did get a date. I did get a nice desk and some other stuff, so we're getting there. Is that all the housekeeping business? I was informed nicely by Dry Juice that, let me bring up this message because I'm bad at stuff. That the come on, where's the message? I should have prepared this, but if you know anything about this, the previous, all the podcasty stuff, we never prepared shit, so why would I change that now? I know she was the one that drew the Worst Year of Our Lives logo, the actual YouTube video picture. She informed me of that, and she told me who drew the YouTube logo, like the thing I've been using as just the logo for the page. Although not that I don't love that, and not that I don't appreciate having that as my logo, as I will get one that's actually properly for the channel. I was just doing that to have something. I could have sworn she told me, but maybe I read it and thought that, or no, you know what? It was a comment in the YouTube. No, then just go to the previous page and you'll know exactly who did it. I thought it was a message sent to me. Anyways, I think, is that everything I've got going on that I need to tell everyone? Yes. So I guess let's just continue on with where we were with story time or whatever from last show. I'm going to do the ceremonial popping of the energy drink at, 5 o'clock in the evening, because why not? Wow. It didn't open. Ow. It did, and then it cut my finger. I'm having a Monster Punch, Pipeline Punch. Delicioso, my favorite. Anyways, so last time we left off at sort of the end of mine and Scott's sort of feuding and wrestling and injuries and all of that. So I wanted to finish with that, and then I wanted to move on to other stuff. If anybody is familiar with, some of the story I told last time, Scott had broken his arm twice at wrestling in the same spot. And I can tell you the stories of how those happened. Give me a second. I'm going to have some Pipeline Punch. So, the first time he broke his arm was in a match in 3-2-1 Battle in Seattle, and I wasn't there. I don't remember the exact details of why I wasn't there. I can't remember if it was storyline related or it was... I don't know why I couldn't make it. So it must have been storyline related, that I was just not on a show for a couple shows or something. Anyways, so I was watching it on Twitch, because 3-2-1 used to stream for free the entire show on Twitch. So I'm at home. I've got it on my phone while I'm probably playing video games, and I'm only half paying attention. It was more just to be supportive for everybody than actually wanting to watch the show. But they were doing like a big 8-man tag, I believe, with where Scott was on one team, Dan was on the other team, and then other people, and they did a very common move that I don't know if Scott had ever actually done it, but he kept saying he could, and they do the move. I'm only sort of half paying attention, and I get a message from one of the referees at the show that is like, "Oh shit, Scott broke his arm." And I was like, "What?" I'm literally watching the match, man. And then I look and I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess I haven't seen Scott in the ring in a little while." Like, huh. So like I don't know. I don't know that I fully believed he had broken his arm, but not not like somebody's lying to me, but like maybe he's just hurt. Like at wrestling, you just get hurt. You get bruised and you get sore and you injure things, and then the next a couple days you're a little beat up, and then after you're like, oh yeah, I guess my arm was fine or whatever. Like that's sort of just how the life of being a wrestler is. So Jer Bear sends me a message saying, shout out Jer Bear, that Scott broke his arm, and I was like, oh shit, okay. And then yeah, sure enough, he fractured his forearm. It just sort of got caught underneath Dan as they landed, which happens, and so he was out for a while. And when he was recovering, he'd kind of just like lost interest in paying attention to the wrestling. And I don't know if our friend Steve will ever hear this. I think we probably said this to Steve in the past, but if he is listening, he was the sort of the what we call the booker in wrestling. So he's the one who plans out the matches and the storylines and who's winning and where we're going. And, like that, he's sort of the one person in charge of all that, but he was also doing a lot of the financial stuff. But we've been friends with Steve for at this point for like 15 years, probably, maybe a little less, but yeah. And once when we were wrestling, we very much were like trying to, well, it's not, I don't want to say manipulate, because we weren't trying to manipulate our friend. We were just trying to, not everyone's really meant to always be a booker. And we just wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of influence in, I mean, yes, mostly what we were doing, because we knew what we wanted to do and we wanted to make sure we could do it. But just like keeping the show at the highest possible quality you can for like a local indie show in Seattle. And once Scott got injured, he had no interest in paying attention and then again, I'm not saying this is Steve's fault at all, but without Scott had no input on anything. Like he didn't care. So if there was posting that was like, here's the matches for the show, anything we should move or change or blah, blah, and Scott just like wouldn't care. So I don't want to say that like the match quality kind of did go down because there wasn't as much like fighting for things as we had before, but that it is what it is, right? So Scott has surgery and he gets a metal plate put in his forearm like Lex Luger, although Lex Luger's was on the, I guess they're both on the outside. Anyways, like Lex Luger. So he has the surgery, he does the rehabilitation, he was a big old baby bitch about it, and it's healed. So we go back to wrestling and he and I have a match. And wait, am I remembering things wrong? Are my brain's bad? No, yeah. So he and I have a match, and we do sort of a spot that a move that we'd done to each other a bunch of times, which is sort of like, we were really obsessed with, in New Japan, there's Kazuchika Okada, who's in AEW now, but he was in New Japan. And then Carl Anderson, who is in WWE and sucks now, but he was great when he was in New Japan. So Okada and Anderson had some pretty good matches in the mid-teens, like 14, 15, 16-ish. And they would always have these insanely good counters because Okada does the Rainmaker, which is a waist around the waist, sort of ripcord. So you swing the guy out and do the lariat. It's the move that Scott's finisher. And Carl Anderson was doing RKOs, essentially, like jumping up and doing a cutter where you grab the guy by the face, like, his face goes into your shoulder, you land on your back, he lands on his stomach flat, like lengthwise across the ring. And they'd had all these like really cool counters to it that they had done every single time they'd wrestle each other. So Scott and I were like obsessed with that stuff. So there was a few of the sequences that they had done that would do every other match when we wrestled each other. We would just sort of change up which one we did. So this one was very simple, like go for the Rainmaker, counter it. I jump up for the cutter. Instead of both of us dropping down, he throws me back to my feet, gets me back in the Rainmaker, swings me out to do it. I duck the line. We go for the backslide. We fight out of it. We separate, and then we both throw a clothesline, but so you're putting your arm straight out to your side, and then you're swinging your arm at your opponent. And the idea is you hit them in the chest and they fall down. but we both threw them and hit each other in the arm intentionally, because that was the spot, right? Is I'm throwing a line, or he's throwing a line, and I'm blocking it by throwing a clothesline. And I hit him in the arm, and we finish the match, and we get back, and he's like, you know, like he really squeezing his hand tight and like flexing his hand open and closed and everything. And I was like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, yeah. He's like, that double lariat like really kind of like vibrated through my arm. And we're like, "Oh shit, that's not good." And he's like, "No, I think I'm okay. And then that was it. And then, you know, however long, a couple, maybe 4 months later or something, he had a match against our friend Tony Baroni and just blasted him with a clothesline, like a normal clothesline in the chest, like you would do, you know, 10 of them in a match, like it's a normal thing. And, refractured his arm right at the edge of where the plate was. So like the plate went, you know, if it was a 3-inch plate or whatever, it would go like it broke right at the end of where the 3-inch plate was at the, like over the top. So now he's broken his arm twice. And so he had to go in, he had to have surgery again. They put in a much larger, thicker plate into his arm. And this time he was like, "No, I am not going through this again. I am going to rehab the shit out of my arm. I'm going to wait until it's at like 110%. Like I'm not," because he admitted that he rushed back quickly because he wanted to wrestle. So he knew that he wasn't like, you know, 100% ready to be in the ring and doing the match, but he loved it so much that he couldn't stay away from it, right? So this time he admitted, he was like, "No, I rushed back way too quickly. I shouldn't have done that. I'm not having my arm broken again," which led to years of Kelly and I chanting at him third surgery, because it's just like, it's crazy that you could break your same arm almost exactly in the same spot while you have a metal plate in your arm. But we just kept third surgery. He's like, "I'm not having a third surgery." And then he would say, "If I'm getting a third surgery, it's the surgery." So he sat out for a much longer time this time. I think he was out for like almost 6 months. I think he broke it the second time in May, and he came back in December, I think. I'm not 100% certain on that. I know he was going to come back for January. So maybe it was 4 months, maybe it was 6 months. I don't remember, but yeah. And he had, you know, like the gross surgery scar in his arm, which I think he was kind of self-conscious about. But like, whatever, it's not like it's some kind of weird birth defect or something. It's a scar from having a steel plate put in your arm. But yeah, I think he was kind of self-conscious about it just a little bit, because it is this like big, huge thing on the inside of your forearm from where they sliced you open and stapled you closed. So he did that. He came back, and we, in the nicest way possible, tried to put ourselves in a much higher position than we reviewed at the time. And it caused some friction between us and our friend who was in charge, because we did like a yearly Royal Rumble, which people who are familiar with wrestling will know that a Royal Rumble happens every year in January. And it is a 30-man over-the-top elimination style, entrant-based match with the winner getting a title shot at the big show. So we did that. And because Scott had been away for so long, and he was, you know, like Scott genuinely was one of the biggest stars there, he just kind of assumed he was winning it. And I had put together and booked the previous 2, I guess, maybe 3. And so when I was putting everything together, I like booked it so Scott was coming back and winning. And when I sent it to our friend Steve, who was in charge, he was like very mad at me about putting Scott in. And I was like, "Oh shit!" Like I'm like legitimately like, Scott told me he was winning, so I thought it was legit. And he was like, "No, I don't." Like, it's like, "I don't have him winning it at all." And I was like, "Oh fuck!" So then I'm the one that has to tell Scott like, "Hey man, I know you think you're the number one babyface in the company, which realistically you probably are, but Steve doesn't want you to win, and sorry." And he was kind of pissed because, you know, he's been gone for 6 months, and the person that was winning, I guess I'm looking back at it now, like I understand where Steve was coming from with what he was booking, but I don't know. I guess I sided with Scott at the time, but going after that, I was like, okay, whatever, no big deal. Like, let's just move on. But so I had gone from being like a big bad heel who had a group, like a faction. There was 5 of us or 6 of us, maybe at the most. And it was just like a bunch of like shitbaggery, like get the crowd to boo you as much as you possibly can and have everybody hate you, but just do like scummy things. Like, it's not like I was beating everybody up and winning every single match. It was like, you know, running away and hiding and cheating and like bullshit tactics and like comedy and stuff. Cause that's what I'm the best at. And that's my favorite thing to do. So I'd done that for a while, and Scott and Kelly were a team, and Scott had won the title the world title a few times, and him and Kelly were doing their thing. And Kelly got hurt a couple times, which is just really unfortunate because Kelly is legitimately the best wrestler that I've ever been around. And I've been around like professional wrestlers, like guys who are in New Japan and in WWE and stuff. And Kelly is legitimately like the best wrestler I've ever been around. But he's just, unfortunately for him, he's like made of glass sometimes. And so Kelly had gotten hurt quite a few times, and that just kind of led to Scott being more of a singles wrestler. And he kind of was a star. Like, he was a big deal. You know, he had a big following, he sold tons of merch. So he's doing that. I'm doing my thing. I had won the title. I did some feuds with him. Which I'm like, so like, that was like the best time of my life, was feuding with Scott. We did a match at an outdoor tattoo festival in downtown Seattle, where the ring was outside in the middle of the street. And you know, he and I had wrestled each other so many times that we got to the venue, we put our stuff away, we walked through a 15-minute match in about 5 minutes, and it was like one of the best matches I've ever had in my life. And we didn't even have to plan anything. We just knew the spots. We knew what we were putting together. And we were just like, man, like, are we professionals now? Are we like the greatest professional wrestlers of all time? We didn't even have to get in the ring and do anything. Like, I couldn't believe how like seasoned we had become. And we were only like, you know, this is like 20, I don't know if I can tell you the exact date without looking it up. 17, 16, 17, somewhere in there. Let's just say it's somewhere in there. I'll look it up right now. So, you know, like, we'd had some feuds for the title, and then I ended up losing the title, which again, like, that's fine. And also, it was an awesome match, and I'm very happy about it. Where are we? Belltown, whatever the hell it's called. It was before I won the title. I know everybody loves it when you do research on the pod, but suck my butt. It was August 20th, 2016. It was the 3-2-1 Battle Tattoo Expo show, where we main evented. We went 13 minutes. And we were like super, super happy about everything that happened in that match. So we kind of, you know, we reconvene, we go back and forth, like, you know, we'd have a couple matches, and then we'd separate and we'd do our own thing, and then we'd sort of naturally gravitate back towards feuding with each other, and then we'd have a couple matches and we'd separate again. And we did that for a few years. And then my little faction thing had sort of run its course, and we didn't really know what to do as far as like how to keep it moving forward. And so we decided, now at the time it seemed like it made sense. I wish I hadn't done it this way. I wish we had either figured something else out, or we had just kept doing what we were doing. But I decided to turn good and have my team turn on me, which, you know, at the time made a lot of sense. I was helping out 2 sister wrestlers, who I'm like, you know, Bambi, I'm incredibly close with. She's like one of my best wrestling friends, and her sister, who we've, you know, I've been around them for years, and I rescued them from getting beat up by my faction, and then they turned on me, like, you know, whatever. And then I became a whole sister for a while, but then after that, we had some plans that, you know, like kind of fell through, and formed a tag team with one of my best friends in wrestling. And as good guys, we used to be big rivals. We became a team, and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I'm kind of floundering. We've done all this stuff where now I'm a face, but like I'm just not a natural face. I mean, in that aspect, like when I was just being essentially myself, I'm just not a natural baby face. I don't like playing to the crowd. I don't have the energy levels to be like constantly motivating and you know, fired up. And so I wasn't really enjoying it. Not to say that I didn't enjoy teaming with Cody, because I love teaming with Cody, even though we kind of didn't get a lot of good opportunities as far as good matches. We had a couple, and then we had a couple, just the worst match I've ever had in my life, which was Cody or Cole Crazy and I defending the tag titles against two guys from Hood Slam in Oakland, Drugs Bunny, that's right, you heard me right, and Funny Bone. And considering we were the home team and the current champions, they didn't want to do fucking anything, so we didn't get a chance to do anything. They just kind of kicked our asses the whole time. And then Funny Bone, despite the fact that we told him the ceiling is too low and there's a beam that goes across and you can't do a top to floor moonsault, still tried to do a top to floor moonsault and ate shit on it. And Drugs Bunny did a bag of fake cocaine that it was all over the ring and all over our gear and all over everybody, and it fucking sucked. Anyways, so we move on to what am I going to do next? Like I've run out of stuff, and I'm kind of, you know, like I'm kind of getting a little bit sour with wrestling because I'm just like not having fun like I used to. And I don't know if Scott ever got that way. I mean, Kelly and I have always shared that, where we're just sort of like bored or unmotivated, or sometimes, you know, like in the level of wrestling that we're in, you don't always get the best level of opponents every night. And that's not a knock on any of the people I wrestle with, because I'm friends with all of them. But like sometimes you get a really good match and sometimes you're like, I'm not really thrilled about this. And I think a lot of people at this level get that. So I just kind of didn't know what to do. And I like what I'm going to tell you people is, I told Scott, so he knows. It's not like this was some big secret I didn't tell him, but like, I didn't know what to do, and Scott and I, we'd always talked about, just like jokingly, we'd talked about being a team, right? Like me, Scott, and Kelly, and we were going to be the Fur Horsemen, which was just like kind of a joke we'd had for a few years. And we're like, fuck it, let's just do that. Like, let's just go towards being the Fur Horsemen. Like, who gives a shit? We're not doing anything right now. You know, like Scott's not in the title picture. Kelly's at most shows, but not every show. And I'm just like doing nothing. So I'm like, why don't we just go towards that? So we just kind of like, I mean, we kind of did it on our own. We didn't really tell we didn't really go through the channels of like, hey, can we do this? We were just sort of like, yeah, we're fucking doing this. This is what we want to do. We're fucking doing it. So we set up the feud with me cutting a promo that got me in trouble because I referred to Kelly and Scott in ring in a promo as Fur F-slurs, which I thought, obviously I know it's a bad word to say, but I forgot that it was Seattle. And so I made a lot of people very angry. Don't worry, I only sort of vaguely had to apologize for it. And the next show, I was made to go in the ring out of character and on the microphone apologize for what I had said, but it was supposed to be during the show. And the show was me versus Scott, where if I won, I got to shave off all of his fur and like essentially skin him and turn him into a rug. And if he won, he got to send me away to the island of Dr. Moreau. And so we have this big payoff where I've temporarily turned back into a bad guy to do this thing. And they wanted me to come out like on the show, like live on the internet, and apologize out of character and then go on and have this like big blood feud later in the show. And I was like, I'm not fucking doing it. Like, I know I need to apologize, but like, how does that make any fucking sense? Like, I'll do it right before the cameras go on when like all the audience is there. Cause I feel like the audience were the only people that were mad about it. It was not like on the video stream, people were saying, get him out of here. And I can't believe he said the F slur. Like, no, it was just like 10 people in the crowd who were SJWs that were like mad about me using the word. And then like in a very funny way, and we only discovered this like several months ago, is that I actually wasn't the first person to say it on camera in our little group. I'm not going to tell you who it was because I don't want him to get mad at me if he ever finds out. But in some of the I Sucks Dicks promo stuff that we did that were like before shows, somebody said it and he couldn't believe he said it and was a little disappointed in himself. And so I'm glad I wasn't the first one to say it. So I apologized before the show in front of like half the crowd, and most people didn't know what I was talking about. And a lot of people in the company were still kind of mad at me, but I still did it. And then Scott and I went and had the match, and I lost, and I disappeared for a couple shows. And then when I came back, I had gotten snow leopard gear, although despite the fact that I had sent this person 30 or 40 pictures of snow leopards and said, make me this. And sorry, not make me this, but make me this. And she misinterpreted the rules and made me look more like a regular leopard, which I was not a fan of. So I had to debut wearing not snow leopard gear with a mask that my awesome Mexican friend Justo got made for me because he had done some work for one of the guys in Mexico who makes the like legitimate lucha masks for big star luchadors. And he said like, oh yeah, this guy said that if I ever wanted a mask made, he would make one for me. And I was like, Justo, get me a fucking mask. So I sent him the stuff and the guy made me the mask. Does it fit my head properly? Even though I measured my own head, it does not. But that's on me. So I debut and we do this thing where we're going to be the fur horsemen, parentheses, except none of us are horses, which initially was just the joke. But then when we got shirts made, and I was like, well, we're putting the joke on the shirt. Like, we have to. And they were like, okay, fine, sure. So we put the line, except none of us are horses on the shirt, which if some of you have that, check it out. It's on the bottom. And we kind of like took off with it. We just started doing like a lot, like some tags and then like singles and trios stuff. And it all built to us getting a big trios match at Battle Mania, which was like the big 3-2-1 battle show in downtown Seattle at the Showbox, if anybody is familiar. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do one point soon, hopefully, is one of my streams will be me watching these matches and going over them and talking about them and just, you know, the ins and outs and the backstories, whatever, because some of them are pretty interesting. So we have all these big matches and stuff. And again, we are kind of floundering a little bit. We're not really certain what we're going to do. You know, like we're not in the tag team title picture because we thought that all the tag teams kind of sucked. And we didn't really want to work with any of them. So we kept ourselves out of that. But then we didn't really get a lot of other opportunities because we were a 3-man team who wasn't doing tag team title stuff. So we had kind of like lost our way. And at this point, Kelly had decided that he was kind of done doing the like comedic dog stuff because Kelly's a werewolf. And, he just kind of was over it. He'd been doing it for so many years and he wanted to just be a wrestler, like a guy who just does moves and is kind of more technical, which I get if that's what you want to do. Like I would rather do comedy stuff or be a bad guy. I don't want to do things I'm not happy doing. So Kelly turned, did I get hurt? I'd hurt my hip and I still managed to wrestle even though I shouldn't have. And we did a thing where I got hurt during the match and Kelly came out to be Scott's partner. And then he turned on Scott and he cut his tail off and he said, I'm done being a wolf. And it was all building to Battle Mania 2020. That was going to be me and Scott versus Dan and Kelly, which if anybody knows actually ended up being what was the last match Scott had was that match 4 years later. So we do all this, we're setting up everything, and then the word gets out that there's this potentially very life-threatening virus going around in the world, and there was a lot of stuff that was initially said that like, oh, it's in Washington. There's a lot in Washington, and no more wrestling. The shows shut down. The company shut down. We couldn't cross the border. We couldn't go into America, and ultimately it was great because my hip got to heal, and it made the desire for wrestling to become greater, because, you know, when you have to do something all the time and it kind of feels like a chore, and then you can't, like, despite what you want, you can't do it, then you want to do it more. So it really just, like, the whole pandemic, all we did was talk to each other about, hey, I just want to wrestle. I just want to wrestle. All I want to do is wrestle. Like, we got to figure out a way to wrestle. And that's, we would talk about it all the time. And we'd come up with ideas and concepts, and we would send them to each other. And we were talking about, like, okay, so we do this for a year, and then the next storyline, we build this, and we did it. And, like, that was a huge part of the pandemic for us, was just begging to get back into wrestling. And it eventually, you know, once things started to open up again, and we had to, you know, you have to test. It was such a nightmare because, so anyways, we get back to shows. We did a couple in Seattle. Then the company that 321 became sort of, you know, some people spread off into their own branches and started making their own little companies based sort of kind of similar ideas or with the same people, which is wild because, like, when we started wrestling at 321, there was like 2 wrestling companies in sort of the Seattle area. And then by the time the pandemic was kind of over and everything was opening up, there was like 9 companies. And, you know, most of them had been 321 associated people that were running them. So SOS kind of was the new 321 sort of. And they were running some shows in Seattle, and Scott had gone down and done some. And then I went down and did one. And then they decided to move to Tacoma, which is about an hour south of Seattle, which fucking sucked. Because not only are we driving down from Vancouver, you know, 3.5-ish hours to Seattle, which you're like, oh, it's such a long trip. But now we're driving from Seattle to Tacoma in the middle of afternoon traffic. So it's an hour. It feels like 2 hours because it's jam-packed in that 1 hour gap between the two cities. So it added that to our wonderful travel. But so we started leaving earlier. We started leaving at 9 o'clock in the morning to get to Tacoma for like 5 o'clock p.m. And it leads to really long days. But when they first opened up the border and everything, and you had to test, and you had to do a rapid test, 12 hours. I don't remember. You had to do a rapid test before you could go back across the border. And finding a rapid test to do on a Friday at any point, because they would email you the results, and all you needed was the emailed results that said you're cleared. But finding one that was within reasonable distance of where we were was a nightmare. And we had no choice. Literally the only choices were we either try and do the rapid test on Friday, or we stay down on Saturday. But of course, like, because everything was still, you know, up in the air, and we didn't know we didn't know how other people were feeling about the pandemic, or like what the pandemic really even was. We couldn't just be like, hey, can we come crash at your house? Like 2 people from another area that are coming in and breathing your air. And like, so we didn't feel like we could ask people to stay at their place. So, man, just finding those rapid testing places was just a nightmare. And there was ones that we would find that were drive-through ones, and you just do them to yourself and pass it in. But the lineup was like 45 minutes. So you just sit in, even though you had an appointment, you would just sit in the lineup and just go very slowly, very slowly, very slowly. And then you'd have to hang around and wait for them to email you the results. And it was just such a pain in the ass. And shout out to our friend Ben in Bellevue. He let us crash at his place a couple times because we couldn't get them until the next day. So, the wrestling show ends at like 11:30, and, we don't get home. That's on Friday. We don't get home until 7:00 p.m. on Saturday because we had to wait till we could get to our appointment for the rapid test, to wait to get the results so that we could cross back across the border. And a lot of the times the Canadian guards didn't even really give a shit. So it was such a huge hassle. But it was, it was what we wanted to do. We couldn't wait to get back into wrestling. And so like 3-2-1 kind of became SOS, and not a lot of crossover with fan base. So we got a whole like group of new people, and Scott and I just sort of worked our way up to winning the tag team titles in a incredibly brutal match. If you go on to Scott's YouTube page, which is youtube.com/notscotthenson, and find our match against the Academy for the SOS tag team titles. And I do some really stupid shit, and I don't regret it, but it was brutal, and my body was mad at me. But we do that, and we were really focused on like, I want to have the most title defenses, and I want to be the longest reigning champions. We were like, we want to be on every show. We don't want to miss a show. Like, we want to try and do a match on every single show. And, that's kind of what we did. And then more opportunities were happening in Vancouver, which I had never wrestled a pro match in Vancouver in my life in Canada. Scott had been doing Boom Pro Wrestling in Vancouver. And then we have a friend locally who started his own company called Apex, Canadian Apex Wrestling. And those opportunities came, and we got to do some really fun stuff. And we show up to our first match at CAW, and we're in the ring planning our match. And our friend just walks up to us and goes, "Yeah, I pulled some strings of the booker. You guys are winning the straps tonight." And we're like, "What?" Like, the tag titles weren't even in the match. They were just like, nobody had been champions yet. And he was just like, "No, I pulled some strings. You guys are champions now." So we were like, oh shit. So now we get to carry around 2 tag team belts, right? We get to carry around the SOS tag team titles and the CAW tag team titles. Well, our friend at CAW decided to buy the thickest leather belt he can with the heaviest metal plates he can. And now we have to carry them around in our bags. So that was a little surprise to us. Like, hey, you're just going to win your second tag titles. And we were so jacked about like, hey, like maybe we're actually like pro wrestlers now, and we can actually do something. And that was a big deal for us, because like we were never really a team until, right before the pandemic. And now we're one of the, I don't want to say one of the better teams, but one of the more heavily featured teams in the area, which is. So I'll get to the end of it, the end of wrestling in a bit. I'm just going to do a little change up here. So we've recorded some kind of form of a podcast for as long as I can remember. I'm not even entirely sure what the first time we recorded was. We were very heavily obsessed with this podcast by the comedian Doug Benson that was called Doug Loves Movies, which was him at live shows with a panel of comedians or actors or friends or people in town. And he would, in front of an audience of like 200, 300 people or whatever it was, and they would play movie-based games. So one was called Build a Title, which was, you take the name of a movie, and the next person would have to add on to the end of the name of that movie or the beginning of the name of that movie another movie. But it went by sound, by the what fucking word am I trying to think of? The sound, like the sound of the word, not actually the actual spelling, right? And so that there was one, and there was a few other things, but the main game was the Leonard Maltin game. So Leonard Maltin is a well-respected film critic, although I don't know if I really care that much about film critics' opinions of things, but he is respected. And so he has books that come out, they used to come out every year he had a team of people who would write the reviews for him of the movies, right? So he would see things and he would write reviews. And then eventually they developed it into an app on your phone or your iPad or whatever. And so Doug would play the Leonard Maltin game, which was he would ask them, he would read the description of the film, but without any specific details to character names or the plot, or, he would just read part of the review that Leonard Maltin gave, and it would just give you like clues. And then you, as the not us, but the actors or comedians or whatever, they would have to tell him based on how many actors were listed in the cast, because it's not a full cast list. It's like the main actors. So say there was 10 actors listed on the cast list, and then you would say like, okay, how many actors could you name? If you heard the bottom 4 names of this movie, the bottom 4 listed actors, do you think you could name the movie? And then they would sort of like place the bets of, I could do it in 4, I could do it in 3 or whatever. And then if you thought you could name the movie, you do 0 and you just name the movie. Or you could do -1, -2, and you would name the movie, but then you'd have to name the top billed people in order as far as what was on the app. And that was like, we were hugely into that. We were like massively obsessed with it. We listened to every episode. We listened to them in the car rides down to wrestling. We listened to them like all the time. And because we're unoriginal assholes, we just started doing that we started doing it for fun. Like we would just hang out and we would just do it. We would play the game. Scott had the app. We would create categories and then we would just play it. But then we kind of decided, like, we're already doing this. Why don't we just record doing it? Even though obviously we realized we're just ripping off Doug Benson, but it's not like we were going to try and get famous off of playing the Leonard Maltin game. We just kind of were doing it we had, we had a small group of wrestling friends that would listen to whatever, watch every video we made and every promo we made and everything. And so at a certain point, we're like, why don't we just record this for everybody? Like, everybody can listen to this and like have a laugh, I guess. And we used to invite our friend Nick, who would he would video call on the laptop, and then we would have to try and record him off the laptop as well as whoever else was there. We initially started recording it on Scott's BlackBerry. That's right, a BlackBerry recorded the beginning years of the podcast. We would normally do it at my house, my parents' house, on the sun deck outside, where there would be 3, 4, 5, 6 of us all huddled around Scott's phone playing the game. We had everything written out. We wrote out, build the titles. We wrote out all the categories and stuff for the Leonard Maltin game, which maybe I still have them somewhere. I'm not sure. So but like that was how the podcast just kind of started, was us just recording the things we were doing. I mean, it was mostly the summer, and it would be at night, and we would be out there. Like, it'd be you think this podcast or the worst year of our lives had been long episodes? Like this was like 4, 5, 6 hour episodes, horrible audio quality. Probably a lot of it was incoherent and unrecognizable garbage, and just a lot of us laughing and being idiots. And like, it was never intended for anyone to really listen to. But I think some of it is actually on. I just realized that the gain has been up all the way. Well, shit. Whoops, sucks to suck, everybody. Listen to it a lot quieter. Fuck, god damn it. I can hear Scott yelling at me and calling me an idiot. Like, you fucking idiot. Anyways, now we're back to normal volume. It was never meant to be heard by anyone. And then we decided, I don't even remember the moment we decided to do it. We had been, like, we weren't always doing Leonard Maltin. We were doing WrestleMania reviews. Sometimes we were just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff. And it was just us hanging out like normal, but there was a phone recording what we were doing. And I'm sure that there's lots of stuff, if that ever exists, go back and find it, that there's like lots of stuff that's like not okay to say, a lot of jokes that were like really risky, like worse than what you would normally hear from us or from Scott. I think maybe some of it's on his YouTube page. It's I Sucks Dicks Heart Cinema is what we called it, because again, we're unoriginal assholes. And then at one point, I'm not sure if it was Dan's. I think it was Dan, but I think Scott also knew about it. Is that there was a podcast out there? I don't know the name of it specifically because but it was similar to The Worst Year of Our Lives, something similar to, like whatever. And it was these guys that were rewatching Sex and the City 2, the Sex and the City 2 movie every single, I don't want to say it was a month, maybe every single month they would watch Sex and the City 2 and record an episode of the podcast based on their reviewing of that movie. And we thought that was like pretty ridiculous. And we're like, also, how much content can you even get out of that? And then I guess just like we made some jokes about some stuff, and it eventually led the way to the year 2000 in WCW, World Championship Wrestling, which was the secondary brand of wrestling when we were all growing up. The year 2000 is considered to be the worst year of wrestling. Just storyline wise and wrestling wise, and like just everything wrestling was bad. And we just kind of made the joke that like we should just do a podcast where every episode is us watching the WCW Monday night show, which was called Nitro. And you would just watch, we watched every week, and then we would just record about it every week until we got the whole thing done. And that's just sort of how it started. And I don't know why we thought it was a good idea. And I also, we started it well in advance. We thought, okay, we want to release these the week that they actually happened in real life. We want to try and line it up much like the Wrestling Observer had been doing for things. They had been watching Raws and Nitros and SmackDowns and everything from like the beginning, and they were releasing it, the week of. And so we were like, hey, let's just do that. So we were in like May or June when we decided to have the idea. So we thought, okay, let's just start watching them now. We'll have all these ones in the bag, and then that way we'll be so far ahead of it that if we miss a couple weeks here and there, we'll still be super far ahead. And I loved our optimism and our thought process at the time. But we're idiots. All four of us, me, Scott, Kelly, and Dan, we're all fucking stupid. We started out real hot, and Dan was very adamant about not going long. He tried to get the episodes to be about 30 or 40 minutes every single week. And he really did a good job of that in the first couple episodes. He would cut off mine and Scott's comedy bits. He would cut off any kind of like rambling or jokes, or like he was just like very matter-of-factly down to business. And I don't think we were really enjoying it, to be honest. I can't imagine Kelly was having fun. And yeah, sure. It was just us hanging out, watching wrestling, and recording what we would have been talking about anyways had we been watching the wrestling. But it became very like too business for what we wanted to do. And eventually it got to the point where we couldn't get not all four of us were available at the same time to do it. And eventually the back catalog of episodes we had recorded were starting to dwindle. And we were kind of in panic mode, and Dan just couldn't, he didn't have the time to do it anymore. And Kelly was only available every other time, and he also didn't really want to do it anymore. And so Scott and I just kind of had to soldier on, the two of us, because we were the ones that had more time to do it, and we also really wanted to do it. And that's just how that sort of started. This podcast started as a wrestling podcast, which didn't do great in the beginning. It did okay. But once we ran out of 2000s Nitros, we kind of thought okay, that's a season of the show. A season of the show took 3.5 years. And I mean, obviously there's the, pandemic-y stuff and whatever, but 3.5 years to do one full year of WCW Nitro is ridiculous. So after the Nitro's done, we, Scott and I are hey, we kind of have an audience. We had enough people they were listening to us every week, they were like, well, we obviously got to keep going. And that's just sort of where it kind of evolved into, doing comedy bits and just kind of, the things that Scott and I would say to each other in public or in the car or hanging out. And that just sort of became what we recorded, was just us being our caricature selves when we're around each other. And we both love movies. Movies is like a huge part of my life and his life, and wrestling and just everything in general. And so we kind of decided okay, let's do some movie stuff because we really love movies. And then we did, best of the decade stuff during the pandemic. And we really, really genuinely loved doing that. And it really took off. And then after that, we were like, maybe we should do wrestling ones. And then do you remember, I don't know if anybody's who's listening to this has listened to everything for the podcast. I mean, there's a few people I know for sure, but we were doing 2 episodes a week, one wrestling one and non-wrestling one. That's insane. I don't know how we managed to do that. I mean, I do know how we managed to do that. It was literally one of my only days off from work. We spent the entire day recording 2 episodes, but we just kind of evolved from there. And I don't know if he thought that it would ever take off the way it did. I certainly didn't. I really did not think that we were going to be. I thought we were talking to 20 people, and I thought no one was hearing what we were talking about. And it was crazy to me that I'd always ask him what were the downloads or what were the listens, and he goes, 1,000 something. And I was like, what? There's 1,000 people listening to my awful voice. And he's like, yeah, mine too. And I was like, that's weird. And I think it helped, he was doing Adam streams, and there was a lot of, people that were there that they like Scott, and then they're like, oh, Scott has a podcast. And then they come over and they listen to the podcast. And, just over time, you accumulate people and you accumulate furries and internet weirdos. And I'm sorry, none of you are weirdos. Well, some of you are weirdos, and some of you are furry weirdos. But you accumulate that over time. And we just grew and grew and grew. And it was great. I couldn't believe it. And when we would do the all request live spectaculars, and I just couldn't believe how are people giving us money to watch garbage? I never thought in my life I'd be watching some of these awful movies that you people had requested. And I was like, how are people paying for us to watch? It's our lives are crazy. And that's what it was. It was just crazy, experience of hanging out with your best friend and just dicking around and having people hear you dick around and give you money and make inappropriate jokes and see if you're going to get demonetized. And yeah, it's just, I never thought we would get to the level that we're at ever. And it's a testament to his drive to be a grifter and be a swindler and a con man. Because it's really, honestly, it's it's an affectionate way of, I'm saying that. I'm not saying it as a negative way. I mean, that's what it was. And I don't want anybody to think that he's if you had a relationship with him and you were donating money to the podcast or just to him or whatever, I don't want you to think that he was conning you or he was trying to be a grifter and just get money from you. I mean, he did genuinely love the human interaction, and he he liked making people laugh, and he liked having, a community around him that he could socialize with that kind of had the same mentality as him, or, that ideas. But he was very good at it. And I've seen him do some things that I'm not happy I let happen, but I just, whatever. It was his life, and I wasn't going to interact and interfere with what he was doing. But he was so good at just, it's my birthday, you guys have to give me money, it's my birthday. Or I really could, I'm really so poor, I could really use this for, stuff like that. He was so good at doing all of that. And there was a part of me that felt guilty, but there was also a part of me that was we're giving people an outlet, and we're giving people content, and it can be a job, to be honest. A lot of the times it did seem like it was kind of a chore. I had to do this on, I only have, one day that I have to watch all these things. I have to write notes. I have to do all this stuff. And it can be, I'm not again, but this is going to sound like I'm complaining about the minor internet fame I have. And the, you know, like the support and friendship and everything. Like, I'm not like, it's so ridiculous that like I have to watch this bad movie or these bad internet videos or this entire season of an anime in the next, 4 days. And I have to take notes and like, I never got to admit this to him. I don't know if he knew or not. Again, like some stuff you just don't talk about and you never really bring it up with your friends. Like a couple people have asked me some things and I was like, how the fuck would I know? But there were a few times where I was just too busy between, like work and relationships and other life stuff that I just didn't have the time to dedicate to watching something or everything we had to watch or like an entire season of anime. And if you the listener, I don't want you to think that I didn't appreciate you donating or like wanting me to watch your thing. And like I would say like 80% of the things that people have requested and paid for, I have watched. But there were definitely some times where like I had 1 day left before we were recording and I hadn't watched like, let's say 8 episodes of a 12 or 14 or 16 episode thing. And so I would just go online and watch a YouTube video that would kind of give me the gist of it. And if you listen to those episodes, you can kind of tell what I didn't watch, because I will stop talking and I will just let Scott talk and let him kind of run through the plot or the ideas. And I'll just throw in like the little bits that I got from like a YouTube video or from reading a review or something. I'll just throw in a little thing there and then he goes rambling on a little bit more. So like I apologized if I wasn't good content those days, but I just, sometimes I just didn't have time to watch it. I just was so like life gets in the way. And even though this is part of my life, I just sometimes didn't have time. So that was always something I was like, I'm going to have to tell him some point that like, hey, I haven't actually watched all of blank. It's so funny to look back on now, but yeah, so I mean, yeah, the podcast it took off, and we love you, got every single person listening. Like, we love you. You guys are amazing. Like, you've got this incredible fan base of like people and supporters. It's unbelievable, and especially for me, like I am genuine. I am kind of shy, but only to the extent that okay, let's get real for a second. Let's talk about some real feelings here. So like I got bullied a lot as a kid. And I think it was just because I was a loud, like kind of like goofy, silly, outgoing kid, and people just, or like other kids, they looked at it as like this guy's kind of like a weirdo or a loser, which is ridiculous because like I had lots of like I had friends, I played sports. I was social, but just like, yeah, I got bullied a lot. And I think as I got older, there was like this fear built into me about like, not doing anything that would embarrass me to the point where people could make fun of me for it. Like there's kind of this, it's not a fear. It is a fear of failure, but it's a fear of like, if I don't like overextend myself as far as like being a personality, if I'm not loud and obnoxious and really out there, then I won't have to like be in a situation where I'm embarrassed or I'm made fun of by somebody or I'm mocked or I get negative attention. Like, so I've definitely, like, that's a big part of who I am. And it was, I don't even know where I was going with this, but I was like, it's really nice to have had Scott there to just like feed off of and do that kind, like be that kind of person with. And I could just like be stupid and an idiot and say dumb things. And sometimes I would get a laugh out of him. And I was like, yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was trying to do here. And there's like a weird thing inside of me that's like very afraid of being made fun of, even though I don't do anything to actively, like, I'm not mature. I'm not an adult. I'm a goofy loudmouth who, is almost never serious and just makes jokes, and that's just who I am. And so why am I so like nervous about having people mock me or say something about me, or be like, oh, look at this guy, like, look what he's doing. Like, I don't understand why I think that's so important. And I'm hoping by being able to like stream and put myself out there a little bit more, that'll go away. I mean, obviously I'm going to get like, you get negative stuff, or people don't like your stuff, or they don't think that you're as good as you think you are, as funny as you think you are, as whatever. Obviously there's a lot of that. And I understand that for sure, that I'm never going to be able to please everyone. But I'm thinking, like, if I do this, maybe I get a little bit more comfortable and I'm a little bit more out there, and I can sort of break out of being such a homebody, because I'm not really an introvert. That's the thing, is like, I like socializing. I just have such a low social battery that I don't want to go out and do like a big thing with people. I want to go out for like an hour max, do like, say hello, meet, say blah, blah, and then go back home and just be at home. Right? That's more of what I'm comfortable with. And so having a podcast is great. But then like the opposite of that is like, also I'm a wrestler and I'm in front of like 300 people all the time. It's very weird. It's a very strange life. I don't even know where I was going with this. I just tangented off into something. But yeah, so like there's the wrestling, there's the podcast, and then there's just like in general, just like being a friend and hanging out. Like we did everything. Food, like we would look up places to eat wherever we went, anywhere, and just find like what's a cool, unique place to go. And all the coffee places, like there's legitimately not a coffee, like, a hipstery kind of coffee place in the greater Vancouver area that Scott had not been to. Like, I genuinely think he had frequented every single place just to see if they were good. And then he would tell me, oh, I went to this place, and it would be in some part of Vancouver that he would expect me to know, even though I didn't grow up in Vancouver. And I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. And then he's like, yeah, it was pretty good. Like, they had this, and I'm like, okay, sweet. But like, that was very much part of his personality, was like finding the best coffee places, or finding like a good donut place, or a sandwich place, or pasta, or whatever. And like, he was very much on top of like, oh, we got to go, like, next time we go to blah, 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 we got to go here. Okay, cool. And then we'd go, obviously. And then, like that was like a big part of the friendship. But just like watching movies and watching wrestling and comedy shows. We went to a lot of comedy shows. We used to drive down to Bellevue in Washington, and we went a couple times. We bought tickets, and then you would sign up, register or whatever it is, give them your email and whatever. And then when they had shows that weren't selling very good, they would just give away free tickets, or sometimes 2 for 1 if it was a bigger name act, but they would just give you free tickets. So like we would go, and I don't remember specifically who we got to see for free or for half price, but we went down, we saw the Sklar brothers, and we saw Amy Schumer before she was famous, and she was not friendly at all. And we took a picture with her, but her manager stood between us and her, and she didn't talk to us. We only talked to her manager, and all she had done was the Comedy Central stuff. That's it. She'd just done the roasts. She hadn't done anything else, and she was just not nice. On the opposite side of that, Sklar brothers ruled. And I took a Creed CD for them to sign, which I still have. And we saw Pete Holmes, and we saw John Mulaney, Nikki Glazer, Dylan Morin. Who else did we see? Aziz Ansari. We saw, we that was a big thing for us. And like we were, when we got busted going across the border, which I guess I can talk about that story now because it doesn't really matter. We were supposed to go see Nick Mullen do his set in Portland the day after the wrestling show in Tacoma, but we got stopped at the border and couldn't cross the border with wrestling gear and blah, 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 blah. So the story with that is that, I'm going to have to wrap it up here real quick. I got 15 minutes left. This might end up being 3 parts. This really might end up being 3 parts, which I'm sure you people are going to be really upset about this being 3 parts. But I we've been crossing the border for wrestling since 2013. And it's never really been an issue as far as like, where are you going? What are you doing? When are you coming back? Are you leaving anything in the United States? Are you meeting people? Blah, blah, blah. Like the standard border officer questions. Never really been an issue. And then in like 2015, maybe, Scott had crossed the border into Portland to wrestle in Portland with our friend Nick, and then came back. And then at some point between that happening and then Scott going back down to wrestle for 321 with Kelly and Dan, or maybe just Kelly, I don't know, Kelly and or Dan, and I was in school, so I couldn't go. And sometime between between the Portland trip and this trip, Nick had crossed the border with this guy that we didn't even, this wrestler locally that we didn't know. And the wrestler locally that we didn't know decided that he wanted to take marijuana across the border to a wrestling show. As if every wrestling show you've ever been on doesn't have weed and cocaine at it. And so he got stopped and denied access and banned from entering the country for however many years. But that also flagged Nick because Nick was in the car with him, which then flagged Scott because Scott and Nick had driven down to Portland together, which then flagged all of us. Even like, so, you know, like guilty by association, even though we don't know the guy. And so, you know, that was like the first sort of like issue. And then for a little while going into the United States, we would get pulled into secondary because there was somebody in the United States in Florida who had the same first and last name as me, who had a warrant out for their arrest. And so normally you go in and you're like, well, like I understand it, but also it's fucking stupid the way they do it, because the warrant is out for somebody who's an American citizen in the United States. I'm a Canadian citizen entering from Canada with a Canadian passport with my face on it. I don't understand how you can I know the system and why it does it, but the border guards have to go, this isn't the guy. Not just like, well, go in and we'll clear you inside. Like, you know, like there's got to be an easier way to do it. So we do this a few times, and then one time we get pulled in and we walk in, we hand the guard the paperwork, and he, you know, does the computer, and then he just sort of like kind of chuckles to himself. And then he signals to me like, hey, come here. And I walk over to him, and he turns the computer slightly so that I can see the monitor, but I can't actually read the information, but I can see the picture of the guy. And he holds my passport up, and he looks at me and he goes, oh yeah, clearly the same guy. Because the doxed Andrew Smith that had a warrant out for their arrest in Florida was a black man who was about 20 years older than me. And clearly I'm that guy. So eventually they caught that guy, or they changed their policies or whatever, and we stopped getting pulled in at the border in the United States. And then for the last, I don't even know, 6-ish years, when I re-enter Canada, I get pulled in because somebody in Ontario or Manitoba, which is the middle or eastern part of the country, has used my first and last name as well as a birthday that is like super close to mine as an alias, and has clearly done something awful. So we get pulled in every single time we come back across the border. Maybe 1 in 10 we don't get pulled in. And usually like, you know, we're leaving Tacoma at midnight. We get to the border at like 3:30 in the morning. It's like 2 seconds. We go in, the border guards check the thing. They're like, yeah, it's not him. And we go, right? Yes, it's a minor inconvenience, but it's pretty simple. But over the course of time, like we'd learned more information about, like, the guy has a full arm sleeve tattoo on his left arm, and I don't. He's missing the tip of his right thumb, which I don't. And so there was a certain point, like, I would walk up to the counter wearing a tank top with my thumbs up and be like, hey guys, not me, right? And they would clear me, right? It's not even an issue. And then one of the last times we had it happen to us, we walk in, do all this stuff, but it was like later. It was maybe later. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. I guess we just left Tacoma later. I don't remember. So we go in, we do the thing, whatever, we sit back down, and then the guy calls me back up, and as we're walking back up to get the passports, he goes, "Hey, bad news. It was you this time." And we're like, "Oh, shit." And then he goes, he's like, just get out of here. But we're like, oh, okay, at least they have a good sense of humor about it. Anyways. So the second to last 3-2-1 show that we were supposed to be on, we were leaving the normal time we do, and we had always been driving to the Aldergrove crossing, which is a smaller crossing, but it's about a 30-minute drive further east than we would normally cross the border. And there was always the weighing up of, is the drive worth it? Well, we'd never been pulled in at Aldergrove ever. And if we went to the Peace Arch or the truck crossing, we got pulled in almost every time because they're like a much larger facility, and they're much larger crossing. And I guess they just have more time and more staff members and whatever to actually check on everything. So we would always look at the times, and no matter what the times were, we would always be like, we should really go, like, just Aldergrove no matter what. And Aldergrove, we would check, and it would be like 5 minutes. We'd get through. It's not even an issue. And every time we would get through, we would go, Aldergrove! And then we would make the joke of like, yes, what's the purpose of your crossing? Like, this is after we've gotten through the border. We're like, what's the purpose of your crossing? Oh, we're going to a wrestling show. Yeah. Oh, okay. And we're going to kill the president. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And then, or like a furry convention. And it was just like a running inside joke, dumb joke that the three of us had. So this time, this second to last SOS show we were on, I think I said 3-2-1 battle before, but SOS show, which was in May or April. We were going to the border, and we saw that all the border waits were 5 minutes. And Scott turned to me and he said, "Oh, do we fucking chance it?" And because, like, a 5-minute border wait at the truck crossing or Peace Arch saves us the 30 minutes of driving east to Aldergrove, which is also in theory 5 minutes. And against our better judgment, we decided to go to the Peace Arch. So we get to the Peace Arch. Of course, the wait is way more than 5 minutes. It's like 25 minutes. And we get at the thing, and we tell the guy exactly the same thing we always tell them. We're going to wrestling in Tacoma. We don't get paid. It's just for fun. It's a hobby with our friends. We just going down to hang out and blah, blah, blah. No, we're not getting paid. Oh, okay, sir. And then he goes, well, okay, we're just, we're just go through here. We're just going to pull you in, whatever. And we're like, shit. Well, I got a fucking great Peace Arch. It's our own fault for going. So we get inside, we check in, and we just kind of waited for a bit. And then the guy eventually called us up. And we told him the deal, and he was like, yeah, okay, like, that's fine. He's like, just go. So we got through. No problem. We go down, we wrestle, and then come home. No big deal. The next time we try to go down, so I guess that was April. This was May. So May, we try to go down, and we go back to Aldergrove because we're like, fucking Aldergrove forever. Why did we ever not go to Aldergrove? We're so stupid. We go to Aldergrove, we wait, we get through, and the border guard's like, I'm sure this will sound sexist, and maybe it's meant to be sexist. I don't know. I'm just the one saying it. Listen, I'm just giving you all the clues, Mr. Policeman. She was way more thorough about her job than any of the male border guards we'd ever had was. So we're crossing with our friend Bambi, who is also a wrestler, and they pull us in, and we're like thinking it's like, okay, we got pulled in Peace Arch last time. That's probably why we got pulled in, is because we got pulled in last time. So they've got it on record that we got pulled in, that we were going down for wrestling, and we were there for like over an hour. And the lady just kept calling us back up to the desk and sitting us back down, and calling us back up to the desk and sitting us back down, and calling us back up. And she was having a really hard time wrapping her head around the situation, even though we'd been telling her, like, we're going down to wrestle. We don't get paid. It's just for fun. We're hanging out with our friends. And then they didn't think that Bambi was a wrestler. They thought that maybe she was just like a girlfriend or one of our friends. So they didn't ask her any questions. And so we just kind of said, like, if they don't ask you, don't say anything. Like, unless they directly say, are you also a wrestler? Don't say anything. And she's like, okay, sure. And so we go up, then eventually they ask, they're like, oh, are you also a wrestler? And she's like, yeah. so she asked us if, oh, when you guys wrestle in Vancouver, in Canada, do you guys get paid? And we're like, yeah, but that's because we know we can get paid. We know we can't get paid in the US, so we don't. And then she goes, okay, so we sit back down, and she calls us back up, and she says, she's like, I understand the situation. I understand that you guys are going down for fun and you're hanging, blah, blah, blah. But because you get paid to wrestle in Vancouver, you're technically classified as professional, like as a profession that you do for money. So even though you're doing it for free in the United States, you are considered a professional, which means you need a work permit or work visa to wrestle in the United States. And the rage meter in Scott's brain went from 1 to 100 in like 10 seconds. Like I could see him, he was so mad. And of course, like I have, and that was one thing about Scott is, I'm not sure if it's entirely that he didn't trust me to talk to them, which why wouldn't you trust me to talk to them? Like I've been talking to them more than you have because I'm the one that gets flagged. But he would always cut me off when I was trying to say something. And I was like, I'm like, hey, dummy, do you know how fucking suspicious that looks when you're not letting me talk? And the same thing when we get to the border, like we would talk to the guard. And because we had gone so many times, like, in the prime of 3-2-1 battle, we were going twice a month. And then since the pandemic, we had gone once, maybe twice, sometimes 3 times a month over the border. So he knew the questions. He knew the order in which the border guards were going to ask him. So his answers were robotic. It was almost like he was starting to say the thing before the border guard even asked him the question. And Kelly and I had to say to him, like, hey, why don't you act like a person when you go up to there, not like a computer, because you're going to get us caught. And he goes, oh, I didn't even realize it. We're like, yeah, you sound like you've rehearsed your speech and you're trying not to get in trouble, and it was always the manner in which he said things, because they would say, oh, how long have you been friends? And he'd say, we've been friends for 20-odd years. And it's like, who talks like that? Are you 100? So anyways, so we do this and then they say, yeah. So they're like, because we'd said we're going to wrestling in Tacoma on Friday. Then we're driving to Portland to see a comedy show on Saturday. And then we're driving all the way back up. And she was like, that's a long drive. And we're like, well, here to Tacoma is 4 hours. Tacoma to Portland is like 2. And then, well, on the way back up, we're not going to drive straight. Like we'll probably stop in Seattle and get food and blah, blah. Oh, okay. And then she's like, well, like, listen, I have to deny you entry as performers. So what you can do, and so, but she said, but you're not denied entry into the United States. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you guys can go home. You can drop off all your wrestling gear. You can come back and you can cross into the United States. You can go watch the wrestling show. You can go to the comedy show if you want. And of course, at this point, Scott's fuming. So he's like, oh yeah, I don't think we're going to do that. And I was like, dude, shut the fuck up. You're going to get us in so much more trouble. And she said, but like, you can't cross into the United States with any wrestling attire, merchandise, anything. You can't enter the country. So, of course, like, he's losing his shit, but he has to calm down. So we go to the car and we called SOS and we told them what was up. And then we tried to formulate a plan. And the plan was that initially what we thought was we were going to talk to them about getting us work permits. And which we had a long discussion about getting work permits. But the alternative plan was we were going to get a second pair of gear that was made specifically to stay in Washington. And that way we would never have to cross over the border with wrestling gear. It would just always be down there and somebody would look after it for us. And that was sort of like plan B. So we were going through all the process with SOS about looking into getting the work permits, and very fair to them. they kind of had not necessarily cold feet, but like a very rational thought process of, this isn't a guarantee. Just because we apply for a work permit isn't a guarantee you're getting a work permit. And it's a lot of money. And if we apply for it and then you don't get it, then we lose the money. So why don't we just go with the get second gear option? And so we decided that, okay, sure, like if that's what you're more comfortable with and it's way less expensive and way more cost effective, then we'll do that. So Scott and I got brand new sets of gear that we were going to leave in the United States. We didn't have everything yet. So we had to send some stuff down across the border with one of our American wrestling friends who had come up to Vancouver to wrestle and then was going back down. And we were just going to meet the gear there, and then we would separate what we needed what was staying down there, because bringing it back into the country was not a problem. It was pretty simple. They didn't really give a shit what we were doing. But it was the taking it across in the United States that was the issue. So we'd gotten brand new gear that we had picked up on the way to the show. And we're at an hour and a half now. Like I said, I'm on a very tight time crunch here, and this is very clearly going to be 3 episodes. So I'm gonna leave it here at the point of I feel like I do owe it to two people to kind of go over the last day or whatever. So I'll do that in the next episode. And if you want to send me questions or AMA stuff or Q&A stuff, you can send them to me on DM me on Twitter. I don't know if my Twitter's still locked to people. It is. Okay. I'll unlock my Twitter so people can send me DMs. And yeah, send me a message on Twitter or Instagram, or I mean, I guess you can post your questions in the comments for this episode as well if you want. And I'll filter through them and I'll try and get everybody's questions answered as long as they're tasteful and respectful, and we'll go from there next episode. Cause yeah, I'm going to go for, I could go for another like hour probably, and I have things I got to do. So, let's just leave it there. And next episode, we'll kind of do the last bit of what I've got to talk about, and then we'll do the Q&A and stuff. And so, once again, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me. I really appreciate it. I love the love and support I got from everybody saying that, yes, people came for Scott, but they're also here for me. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And you can follow me on social medias. The only one I really care about is Letterboxd, at Sarian Softpaws, twitch.tv/Sarian Softpaws, obviously this YouTube channel. And if you want to help support me in transitioning over to the streaming side of things, and you want to send me something, that's amazing. I would love you forever. PayPal.me/Sarian Softpaws. And I will talk to you next week again, probably the same length, hopefully, if not longer, because I won't be under a time crunch. Okay, kisses, bye.